Hi, welcome to another Handy Quilter Sweet 16 Sunday. I'm Paula Storm, and today I wanted to show you a little bit about the new yarn couching foot available from Handy Quilter. Now, the yarn couching foot is a fantastic tool. You can make some really amazing things with just some simple yarn and the yarn couching kit. Now, inside the yarn couching kit, you've got 3 feet for your Handy Quilter Sweet 16, and the 3 different feet have 3 different size they're like a funnel inside the foot. So it's a little plastic insert inside the foot that helps guide your yarn directly to the needle so that you can do some embellishing. There's 3 different size feet. There's a 1.5 mil, a 2 mil and a 3 mil foot, and with that you can use lots of different size yarn. So over here I've got, this is about, for those of us who are Australian understand the ply yarns, this is about a 4 ply. This one here is about an 8 ply. This is a beautiful Noro, and this one over here, the Big Softy by Sadar, this is about a 12 to 15 ply. So for people who are not from Australia and don't use the English terms, this is about a DK, so a double knit weight, so that's about the middle. And for that yarn, I would use the middle foot here. There's a bit of wiggle room, so you can have a play, see what works for you, but by having the one kit, you can use lots of different yarns. So let's head over to the machine and I'll show you how to thread it up. Okay, so the first yarn I'm going to use is this 4 ply yarn. This is a really beautiful yarn, and as I said, it's a 4 ply, so it's a nice fine one. You can go a bit finer than this with the yarn couching, but this is just what I had in my cupboard, so that's what I was going to show you. Now, first of all, what I need to do is bring up my bobbin thread. So as normal, I'll just put the foot down, pull it back up, and pull up my bobbin. And I need to make sure that the top thread is through the funnel and coming out, and I've got the bobbin thread coming out from the bottom. So your top thread needs to be through that funnel before you start. Then what we need to do is take the end of the yarn and we just slide it in between the needle and the bar like that. So it just needs to be loose. It doesn't have to be threaded through the needle or anything like that. Just thread it through there, and then what I'm going to do is just pull it to the side. So you can see that I've pulled the top thread. By pulling it to the side, I've pulled the thread over, and what that's going to do is create a loop around that thread. So all I need to do now, I've pulled it to the side, put my needle down and back up again, and you can see now I've got a little loop around my yarn or wool. And what I'm going to do now is just pull on both my top and my bobbin thread, give it a pull and move to the side, and see how that loop has pulled the yarn or the wool through the funnel. So we can pull that yarn out and we've got our needle threaded, and you can see I can move that freely, so it's not actually stitched through anything yet. So I can move that freely through the funnel. I found about a 4 ply fits perfectly through the smallest foot, about an 8 ply fits beautifully through the middle foot, and thicker yarns fit beautifully through the big one. So that's just kind of my rule of thumb. Now, to get started, the biggest rule is that you need to have lots of slack coming off your yarn, off your ball of yarn. If this gets tight at all, the stitches will miss and they won't be holding down that yarn nice and securely. So you do want to make sure you've got lots of slack. Helen Godden was telling me that she likes to rest it over her hand so that she can see, as you're stitching, she can see it coming off and it's nice and loose. So that's another way. Maybe you might want to try these few little tricks and see what works for you. Okay, so I'm going to put my needle down. So everything's now held in place. I've got my bobbin and my top thread and the tail of my yarn over to the side, and I've got my yarn nice and loose so that it's not going to get caught up. And I'm just going to start stitching. Now, with this technique, one of the biggest tricks is that you really need to have a small stitch length to make sure that yarn's going to be, or the top thread is going to be catching your yarn. You need to use small stitches. So I'm just going to go into a little spiral, and you can see that those stitches are catching the yarn and holding it down nice and securely. Now, if the yarn gets tight, it gets pulled tight, there's maybe a knot in your ball of wool and it's not feeding nice and smoothly, then that needle might miss a few spots and this might become loose. So if that's the case, it's really easy to fix, but I just want to sew a little bit and show you how to cover up those ends. I'm actually just going to stitch over the top of what I've already done. And then I can just snip this off because that's been caught really securely. But if you want to, you can absolutely thread a needle and pull those to the back and tie off a knot at the back so you're hiding it. But for me, this is just a practice piece as usual. So I'm just going to snip those off and that'll get covered up by my stitching. So I'm just going to stitch around again, cover up that join again and go around. Now I've used a grey thread in both my top and my bobbin because I'm going to use a few different types of yarn today, so I just want it to blend. I don't want to be switching out top threads all the time, but if you want to, you can use some fancy threads in the top, maybe a metallic, something like that, and that will really give your couching a bit of bling. It'll look gorgeous. So try out a few different types of thread, but let's just keep going now. As I said, you want to make sure that you've got heaps and heaps of slack of your yarn. Okay, see what's happened here? I've actually missed a few stitches. My needle didn't catch the yarn as I was stitching. So that's really easy to fix. All I need to do is pull away like this. I can actually just snip those threads that have been caught at the end of the yarn. And all I'm going to do now is pull the yarn and go back to where the last spot where it actually caught. And that for me tells me that I am not stitching, well, it could be two things. I'm not stitching enough stitches per inch, so I might need to speed up my machine a little bit, which is what I will do. The other thing that could have caused that is there wasn't any slack on the yarn. So I'll just peel off a bit more yarn so that I know I've got plenty of room and keep going. So I want to be going nice and slowly with my hands, but I want the machine to be going nice and fast. And that's going to give me beautiful stitches that are going to catch the yarn. And there we go. I might just fill in these little holes here before I move on, because now I want to change my yarn. And I might actually just fill in all of that. And there we go. So that's my first colour. So I'm going to switch out now to another colour, and I'm also going to put a bigger foot on because I'm going to try with my 8-ply now. So I'm actually going to put on the bigger foot and have a play with this one. Okay, so I've switched out my foot. I've got the slightly bigger foot on now, and I'm just going to bring up my bobbin thread and make sure I've got some slack there. Now, as I mentioned before, I need my top thread going through that funnel as well. So I actually just need to go down again, back up, and I'll just pull that so it comes through the funnel, because that's where I need that thread to be. Now I'm going to head back over, grab my yarn. So as I said before, this is a beautiful Noro. It's a variegated yarn, and it just looks beautiful when you stitch out using this yarn couching technique. I'm going to just poke my thread or my yarn through there again, pull it off to the side, needle down, needle back up. I've created that loop, and I'm just going to pull. And by pulling the top and the bottom threads, I'm pulling that loop through the little funnel. So there we go. You can see I can move that quite easily. And now I head back over to where I'm going to start. If you want to be a bit more economical with your yarn, you can pull it through so you've only got a tiny little tail, and that'll be quite easy for you to bury later on. So I'm just going to do a few little stitches in one spot to secure everything. Make sure I've got lots of slack coming off my yarn so I don't end up with any knots. And then I'm ready to go. Okay, so what happened here, there was a bit of a loop and it actually got fed through the funnel and it's created a little knot on me. So what I'm going to do is try and work that through. If this was an actual proper quilt, I would probably unpick that, but because this is just a sample, I'm actually just going to move on and pretend like it never happened. But you do want to make sure that that doesn't happen by making sure that there's no little knots or anything feeding through the funnel. It looks really nice if you build up a bit of the yarn. So you can see so far I've just been doing single lines, but if you build it up, it can look really beautiful. Maybe I'll do some little swirls. See how I've got a little bit of a knot here? This yarn I'd actually used for some crochet practice, so you can see that's why I've got all these little twists and turns. So just be careful that you don't feed any of those through your piece. Okay, so that's the 8-ply yarn. You can use chunky yarn, so this one, this is a big softie, and this is beautiful thick yarn, and that would feed quite well through the largest foot, through the 3mm foot, which is this bottom one down here. Yarns that you wouldn't want to use are things like this yarn here. This is a panda yarn called Rustica, and if you have a look at this one, it starts out a bit chunky and then it comes right down to a really thin section. So I think you would probably have a bit of trouble with that yarn because the needle would probably not catch these little sections of yarn. So you might have a bit of trouble using those sorts of yarns. But anything that's got a consistent shape to it, that's the yarn that works beautifully with this technique. As I said, the big ones, even really chunky, is not a problem as long as you use the right size foot. So as long as you use the 3mm foot, just play around. You'll find what suits you best just by having a play. It's so much fun. If you're interested in this technique, I highly recommend you check out Helen Godden's work. She has a really good website and she's been doing a huge amount. She actually was one of the developers of these feet. So she's got some beautiful work using the yarn couching. She had quite a few pieces in Houston this year. So check out Helen's work for some yarn couching inspiration. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with the Handy Quilter Sweet 16 Sunday, thanks to Handy Quilter Australia. And all my batting that I use is Matilda's own batting. I prefer the wool cotton blend, but I also really like this polyester blend as well. It's a poly wool cotton blend. So check those out from Matilda's own. Thanks for watching. See you next week.